Okay, let's dive into this one. The chicken from hell. I mean, what a nickname, right?
It's fantastic, isn't it? But yeah, just so we're clear, we're not talking about actual demonic chickens here.
No. We are talking about a dinosaur. A really interesting one called Anzu Wyliei.
Exactly. And we've got some great sources for this thanks to one of you sending them in. They really detail the discovery, what it looked like. It's fascinating stuff.
Yeah, the goal here is to unpack what makes Anzu so important scientifically and, well, how it got that very memorable name.
Definitely. The material covers quite a bit, the sciencey classification bits, the discovery story.
Physical descriptions, its place in the whole evolution story, all that good stuff.
And what's really cool about Anzu, is how it kind of sits at this interesting point, this sort of bridge between older reptiles and, well, modern birds.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, we're going to find some surprising things about how it looked and maybe how it lived.
Okay, let's get started then. That name, Anzu Wyliei, where does that actually come from?
Right, so Anzu, that's the genus name. It's actually from Mesopotamian mythology. Anzu was this bird-like demon figure.
Ah, okay, so the name itself hints at this bird connection.
Pretty much. And the species name, Wylie, that's a tribute. It honors Wiley J. Tuttle, who was the grandson of a donor to the museum involved.
That's a nice touch.
Oh, yeah.
So when and where was this? Chicken from hell actually around?
Good question. It lived right at the end of the Cretaceous period. We're talking the Maastrichtian stage, so maybe 67 to 66 million years ago.
Wow, the very end of the line for the dinosaurs, basically.
Exactly. Just before the big extinction event. And its fossils. They turn up in the Hell Creek Formation. That's in North Dakota, South Dakota, and Montana. You probably saw the map in the sources showing the spots.
I did see that, yeah. Helps picture it. So how did we find out about it? Was it one big discovery?
Not really, no. It was more like pieces of a puzzle coming together over time. The first key fossils, 2 partial skeletons, were found way back in 1998 by a fossil hunter, Fred Nuss, on a private ranch in South Dakota. These became the main reference, the holotype specimen.
And were they, like, complete?
Not quite. They were disarticulated, meaning the bones were all jumbled up, which
Right.
suggests, maybe the body was washed downstream by a river or something before it got buried.
Right, scattered by time and water. Must have made it tricky to figure out what they had at first.
Definitely. Then another specimen, MRF 319, turned up in North Dakota, found by Scott Hare. That one was studied by Tyler Lyson.
Okay, so different finds, different places.
Exactly. And there was even a jaw fragment, just a small piece, found earlier, back in 93, but nobody knew it belonged to Anzu then.
So it took a while for the picture to emerge.
It really did. It wasn't until around 2006 when researchers like Emma Schochner, Matthew Lamanna, Tyler Lyson, Hans-Dieter Sues, they started collaborating.
And they realized.
They realized these different finds, these bones from South Dakota and North Dakota, were actually all the same animal, this unique new species. The main fossils ended up at the Carnegie Museum.
That's a great story of how science works. Sometimes different people, different finds eventually clicking together. And you said these finds make up quite a bit of the skeleton.
Yeah, remarkably so. Something like 75 to 80% complete when you put all the known pieces together. That's pretty good for a dinosaur.
That gives us a really solid idea of the animal.
Absolutely. So much so that it was named one of the top 10 new species back in 2014. Its importance was recognized pretty quickly.
That definitely highlights it. Now, you mentioned it's the first well-preserved North American Oviraptorosaur. Why is well-preserved the key bit there?
Well, because before Anzu, our knowledge of these kinds of dinosaurs in North America was pretty patchy. We had bits and pieces, isolated bones, fragments.
Not enough to really know what they looked like or how they fit together?
Exactly. We just didn't have a good picture. Hans-Dieter Sues pointed out that Anzu basically filled that gap. It gave us the evidence to finally understand these North American Oviraptorosaurs properly.
Because we knew more about the ones from Asia, right?
We did, yeah. And that led to a surprise. See, back in the Cretaceous, North America and Asia were connected by land.
Okay.
So scientists kind of expected the Oviraptorosaurs on both continents to be closely related. But when they studied Anzu properly,
They weren't?
nope. It turns out the North American ones, like Anzu, were actually more closely related to each other than to the Asian ones.
Huh. So they arrived and then kind of went their own way, evolutionarily speaking.
Seems like it. They carved out their own niche, developed their own features once they were separated.
That's really interesting.
Yeah.
So let's get to the chicken from hell part. What did this thing actually look like?
Right. Well, the nickname comes from it being quite bird-like, but, big and maybe a bit intimidating.
Big crests, beaks, bird-like skeleton.
Sure.
That was the quote, wasn't it?
That's a good summary, yeah. It had a prominent crest on its skull, a beak with no teeth.
No teeth at all.
Nope, toothless. And long arms, ending in these large curved claws.
Okay, claws sound less chicken-like.
Definitely not. And long, powerful legs with slender toes, probably a fast runner. Its tail was relatively short compared to some other theropods.
And size-wise, you said big.
Oh yeah, we're talking maybe 3.5 meters, maybe a bit more. So 11, 12 feet long.
Wow.
Standing about 1.5 meters, almost 5 feet tall at the hips, and weighing maybe 200 to 300 kilograms.
440 to 660 pounds.
Yeah.
Okay, definitely not a chicken. That's substantial.
One of the biggest oviraptorosaurs found in North America, for sure.
You mentioned these things called autapomorphies before, the unique defining traits.
Right.
What were some of Anzu's?
Right, the things that make Anzu Anzu. Well, that crest is a big one. It was high, sort of crescent-shaped, right on top of the snout, made from the premaxilla bones.
Okay.
Another thing, the bit at the back of the skull that connects to the neck, the occipital condyle, it was wider than the hole where the spinal cord goes through, the foramen magnum. That's unusual.
Specific detail.
Yeah, and the front of its lower jaw had these two rounded bumps. Also unique.
Any others? You mentioned some more subtle ones.
A few, yeah. Like a groove on one of the finger bones, the first bone in the second finger. And a little bump, a tubercle, on one of the ankle bones, the astragalus.
Okay.
And then some possible ones from those other referred fossils, like the upper jaw bone, the maxilla, lacking a certain depression near the front of the eye socket,
Yeah.
and bits of the cheekbones being a specific shape, vertically deep, forked at the back. Really detailed anatomical points.
Wow, okay, so very distinct features. Taking all that into account, where does it sit in the grand scheme of dinosaur classification?
It's firmly within the Oviraptorosauria group, and within that, it's part of a family called Caenagnathidae.
Caenagnathidae.
Yep, Caenagnathidae. The analysis, looking at all these features, suggests it's very closely related to another one called Caenagnathus, maybe even its sister species.
So if you were to list its classification right down the line.
Okay, broadly. Domain Eukaryota, Kingdom Animalia, Phylum Chordata, Clade Dinosauria, Clade Sauriskia, Clade Theropoda, then family Caenagnathidae, genus Anzu, species A. Wyliei. There are diagrams, phylogenetic trees that show this branching structure visually.
Right, helps place it. Okay, let's talk lifestyle. Paleobiology. What did the chicken from hell actually do all day? What did it eat?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Based on that toothless beak. The best guess is omnivore, or maybe mostly herbivore.
Eating plants and maybe other things.
Possibly. The beak isn't quite as heavy-duty as some of the Asian oviraptorids, so maybe not crushing super tough stuff, but likely processing vegetation, maybe small animals, eggs. It was probably quite adaptable.
Generalist, then, not a picky eater.
Seems likely. And remember those other differences from the Asian ones? Besides the beak. Anzu was generally larger, had thicker legs, different jaw structure.
Right.
And the environment was different, too. Anzu lived in these ancient floodplains, the Hell Creek Formation. That's quite different from the drier environments where many Asian oviraptorosaurs are found.
Suggesting a different lifestyle altogether.
Exactly. Different ecological niche. Stephen Broussard described it well, I think. A fast-running ecological generalist that didn't quite fit the usual molds.
Of meat-eating or plant-eating dinosaur.
Yeah, I remember that quote. It fits.
It does. And it's important to stress again, all those bird-like features, that's convergent evolution.
Meaning it wasn't actually a bird or directly on the line to birds, it just happened to evolve some similar traits.
Precisely. Because maybe those traits were useful for its particular lifestyle, similar to how they were useful for early birds. Matthew Lamanna called it a really nice link in the evolutionary chain, because it shows this mix of features so well.
A great example of how evolution can arrive at similar solutions independently. What about that crest, though? If not for fighting, what was it for?
Well, like we touched on, Hans-Dieter Seuss suggested display.
Showing off.
Probably. Attracting mates, maybe species recognition. He compared it to a modern cassowary.
The big bird with the helmet thing. Exactly. That crest is also thought to be for display or signaling. Anzu's crest was apparently quite thin, fragile bone, so display seems much more likely than defense or combat.
Makes sense. Like a flashy billboard on its head? Did the fossils show any signs of, a rough life? Injuries?
They did find some evidence, yeah. One specimen had a broken rib that had healed,
Ouch.
and another had an arthritic toe, possibly from something called an avulsion fracture, where a tendon rips away from the bone.
Yikes. Any idea what caused them? Fighting. Predators.
Hard to say for sure. Could be battles with other Anzu, could be predator encounters, maybe just accidents. It gives you a little glimpse into the hazards of life back then.
A tough world.
Yeah.
And sadly, its world came to an end. Like the other non-avian dinosaurs, Anzu disappeared in that big extinction event 66 million years ago.
That's right. The Cretaceous Paleogene extinction, it marked the end for so many incredible creatures, including this one.
So wrapping up our deep dive on Anzu Wyliei, the chicken from hell. It really was a huge discovery, wasn't it?
Absolutely huge. It gave us this incredibly clear window into North American oviraptorosaurs, something we just didn't have before.
Showing this amazing mix of bird-like features and classic dinosaur traits, living in a very different way than its Asian cousins.
Yeah, it really filled a major gap. It was that aha moment,
Yeah.
connecting the dots for North American paleontology in that area. And it beautifully illustrates convergent evolution, too.
It really does. And thinking about it, surviving right up until the very end. It makes you wonder, doesn't it? If that asteroid hadn't hit, what could something like Anzu have evolved into?
That's the great what if, isn't it? What other strange evolutionary paths might life have taken? What other completely unexpected creatures might be out there still waiting in the rock, ready to change what we think we know?
Exactly. Imagine the possibilities. Descendant species even stranger than a chicken from hell. Food for thought.